All right, guys, we got a major oil leak and a major coolant leak, and we have major problems now. This wasn't like this here about a month ago. You can see there's oil, and it looks like evidence of a little coolant leaking too. It's all over the front. As you can see, I've taken the skid plates down. It's all over the front differential, and it's leaking off the oil filter as well. Now up next, I'm going to show you what it is and how to fix it. Alright fellas, what we have is the oil filter adapter with two coolant lines, one going to the radiator, the other going up to your degas bottle. And this adapter goes into the side of the block, and the adapter has sprung a leak. Now you see I've taken the oil filter off, and I've also drained the oil, and I verified that there was no coolant in the oil, thank goodness. However, I had lost quite a large amount of oil. There was still plenty of oil in there, but if this would have gone much longer, we probably would have lost the engine. Now it didn't, for some reason, there was no spots on the driveway, and there's no telltale sign this was going on. And I just happened upon it when I was making the video on how to replace the starter on a no crank, no start situation on this truck. Now what I've done, I've already gone to the parts store and I purchased the Velcro gasket for this. You can see there's 4 bolts. Now I believe the big part of the gasket's going to be the coolant, and the 2 smaller parts are going to be the oil, but I'm not too sure, and I won't be sure until I get the adapter off of the engine. Now this is pretty tight, probably won't show taking the bolts out, but I've got a new tool I'm going to try to use on the coolant lines to get the clamps off. It's got the factory style clamps, and I've got a new tool I'm going to try to use instead of a pair of channel locks to get those clamps off. So let's see what happens. Since I recently did a timing job on this truck, I also replaced the water pump and went ahead and performed a coolant service on this truck as well. So I'm going to go ahead and try to recapture as much coolant out of the truck as I can, because otherwise it's going to end up on the floor when I take these hoses loose from this adapter. You may get a little out, you may get a lot out, but what the goal is to get the radiator down low enough and to get the gas bottle emptied enough where you won't take a shower in this stuff when you take the adapter loose. Plus, if you just did the cooling system like I have, you know, it saves you money in the long run. If you want to go ahead and replace your coolant, just recycle this stuff and get your new coolant and refill when you're done with the job. To assist me with getting the rest of the coolant out, I broke out my handy dandy Harbor Freight cooling system tester and pumped it up with air pressure. And what that's doing is helping to force out the remaining coolant that's left in the degas bottle and the hoses and whatever's down in the bottom of the radiator. and it's all being pushed out to the petcock and out to my bucket. Like I said, you want to try to get as much of this coolant out as possible. You can also do this with shop air if you don't have one of these coolant testers. Once it was finished draining, I got about a half of a 5-gallon bucket of coolant. Next, we're going to have to try to reach in and get both the degas bottle hose clamp and the lower radiator hose clamp loose. And I've got a special tool that I'm going to try on this. I've never used it before, but this is what I have. This is a hose clamp compression tool. You take the tool, you see here it's got these teeth right here. You put the clamp in between the teeth and you squeeze, and it is supposed to compress the clamp where you can get the clamp off. Normally what we use is just a pair of channel locks, but sometimes you have places where you just can't get in there with your channel locks to compress the clamp. So we're going to give this a run and see if it works. Okay guys, I got the lower radiator hose clamp loose and got the hose off, and it did make quite a mess. I didn't see any reason to video that part of it. Now I've got the degas bottle hose, and as you can see, I have the tool clamped to the clamp on the bottom of the hose. Now watch as I ratchet it. All I do is squeeze the grip, and it begins to ratchet it to a position where I can get it off. Now that's all the way. Of course, you know, the camera, I have the camera crammed up in a hole here to try to get you guys a view. Without the camera here, I could reach in here with it like this and pull the hose off. But with the camera in the way, there's no way I can reach my hand in here. But I'm just showing that the tool does work. It does function. And there is a place for the tool. You know, it just gives you an additional option. In mechanicking, you always want options, and this is a good one. Okay, once we got the hose off, we're gonna have to maneuver around underneath the truck and look for spots to get at those bolts that mount the adapter on the block. Now right there's two. Let me slide over a little bit. And there is a third we can get hold of. So let's go ahead and get those out. Alright guys, I got the assembly out. Just bear with me for a second and let me explain what I did. Now the assembly, you're going to be looking up at it like that. And these are the 3 bolts that I was showing you from under the truck. Now I could get those 3 out. This one here, you could see it, but you couldn't see it because it was covered with grease and grime and gunk. So what I ended up having to do is I went ahead and took this drain pan out. This drain pan, I know on 4-wheel drive vehicles it goes over the axle. Now on 2-wheel drive vehicles, I'm not so sure that this pan's in there, but in mine, the pan is in there. So what I did is I took out these 2 bolts and took this drain pan out. In turn, gave me full visibility and availability to this 4th bolt. I took the 4th bolt out, the assembly dropped down, and all I did was unhook this sending unit, which is the oil pressure sending unit, and took the assembly out. Now I've got it here in the vat, and I'm going to clean it up real good. I'm going to clean this other part up real good, and then I'm going to get the gasket out and show you pre-assembly of it, and then I'm going to stick it in the vehicle and go ahead and put the bolts in it where you can see it's you can easily take this out and put it back in and tighten it, torque it down. But to be able to show you, I'm going to have to leave this out until the last step. But I'm going to show you once it's all cleaned up how easily you can see where the bolts are to get to them. Unfortunately, I apologize, I was not able to do that with it in the vehicle because the amount, just the sheer amount of oily, grimy junk in the way. It just, it was falling down on the camera, and I could not get it just right where I could videotape it like I wanted to. So let me get this cleaned up, and I'll get the gasket out, and we'll get the screw or the bolts put in the gasket and ready to be reassembled. Now with the assembly clean, you can see 1, 2, there's the third bolt, and then down here is the fourth bolt. And that one would be hard to see if you have that drain cover that fits over the differential just under the oil filter. Alright, we got our part cleaned up. However, we found a problem. As you can see, it's got a lot of damage, a lot of etching around the coolant area. And what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to try to use some sandpaper on a flat table, and we're going to try to get that out for the most part. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wait a week, 2 weeks before I can reassemble the truck and order this part, which is about $200. So I'm going to get started on this and see if I can get it worked out. And then here we are after about 10 minutes of sanding with some heavy grit paper. And when I get it down a little bit more, I'm going to switch to lighter and lighter paper until I get a smooth finish. And I'm doing it on this table because this table is relatively flat. It's not wood. It's almost like stone. So it helps me keep the part level when I'm sanding. Now if it sands into a slope downward, I don't care. As long as this face is flat, it won't affect the part or the way the part works. Just what I'm trying to do is get rid of this, take off here, and not much here. That way, when I put the gasket on there, it'll be relatively flat, and it should seal like I want it to. So I'm going to continue. And here's after 20 minutes of sanding with coarse sandpaper. And this is after 30 minutes of sanding. 10 minutes of it at 120 grit. Now I think this is good enough. I checked it with a gasket, and the remaining places you see are well inside the sealing areas of the new gasket. So I do believe this will work and will seal. Let's go put it on. Now I'm working on getting everything back in and tight. I got 2 of the bolts in. Got to start a third. Just remember to start these by hand. Do not try to run them in initially with your impact. Also, side note, these torque at 18 foot-pounds. So when you have them all in, all said and done, you want to go back and do what you can to torque with the torque wrench. That way that it is seated evenly across the gasket. The rear innermost bolt, which is the trickiest of them all, I'm going to go ahead and run it up so it seats the assembly. Alright. I'm going to go back through all four and we're going to gently tighten them by hand. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and torque the bolts. So I'm going to start with the top bolt. Then I'm going to go to the next one, which is the inside. And the third bolt. And then the very bottom bolt. Okay, we have them all torqued. Now all we have left is the e-gas bottle hose to put back on, then the lower radiator hose to put back on. Make sure the clamps are on correctly. Then we're going to put the oil filter on. Then we're going to lower the truck down and go ahead and fill the truck with oil and refill the coolant. All right, we get the oil filter on. Now we're going to add the oil. And no, this is not Royal Purple. This is my fill jug that I use because I buy oil in bulk, and it's a lot easier to measure it out in one of these jugs. And now to add the coolant back, and what I like to do is throw a couple of paint strainers in. You can get the paint strainers at Harbor Freight a lot of times. They're real cheap. What this does is just add a little layer of protection, get some grit, grime, bugs, or whatever that may have landed in your coolant, or it can help filter out some of the crap that came out of your coolant when you drank it. It'll take the coolant, it just takes a little bit to gargle out the air. At this point, I have added the entire bucket of coolant that we drained out before we started the repair. Now, I'm going to take the funnel out, and I'm going to go ahead and start the truck, and let's see what happens. Now while it's running, you want to get over in the front of the side of the truck and look underneath and make sure you don't have anything pouring out. And we do not. And you also want to make sure that you have oil pressure, which we do have. So I'm going to let this run a little bit and cycle the coolant, and then come back and add just a little bit more once it's cycled. The truck is up to operating temperature and we have no leaks. Our coolant level is right where it needs to be, and the engine is at operating temperature. Now after the video's over, what I'm going to do is take the truck out. I'm going to hose it down with what the cleaner that I use. It is a degreaser called Mean Green. It's similar to Simple Green. I'm going to hose the entire underside of the truck down, let it sit, and then I'm going to use the power washer, and I've got a special wand that rolls under the truck, and I'm going to power wash the truck multiple times. I'm going to apply the degreaser, let it sit for a while, and then go back and power wash it off. That should get all the oil and goop that's under the truck that's made it real filthy and hard to work on. And then lastly, I'm going to put the skid plates back on, and our repair will be complete. This is Daniel with Boss C351's Productions. I really appreciate you watching my videos. Please like and subscribe to my channel, which will help me bring you more videos like this. Also, remember to look down in the video description on each one of my videos, and I have links to tools and parts that I use at a discounted rate, many times cheaper than you can get in the auto parts stores or your local Ford house. Again, thank you for watching my videos.